So last time I was here, it was great. We talked about how docents are using iPads in tours. And since that time, as Larry alluded to, a lot has changed. And, as we heard from a number of people here, museums across the United States, around the world, are starting to use these. So I've changed course a little bit as what I'm going to talk about. Over the last, the State of the Union of Educators and iPads, and I'm going to show you 25 things that I think are interesting, and I'm hoping that some of them are going to be very basic, because I know there's some people that know nothing about iPads in here, and some of them are going to be really advanced, because there's some people that I know are already using iPads, and I'm going to just show you a bunch of different things that I think are interesting for museum educators. Part of where this is coming from is I've worked on 4 iPad-based projects in the last year that have influenced me a lot, and I've learned a lot just because they're really different from one another. The upper left is what I talked about last time, which is the research project we did with docents at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts using iPads in the tours. This is Pachyderm, which some of you are familiar with, and I've been working on making Pachyderm so it's iPad compatible. We'll talk about that tomorrow. The bottom left is an interesting project. It was a big art project that I did at the Walker Art Center, where we had 20 dancers dance with iPads that were all synchronized to each other at night at a festival of lights. And so I learned a lot about how to manage a large number of synchronized iPads for that. And then this is another project that we're going to talk about tomorrow with Liz from the Art Institute of Chicago, which is a project where we've installed iPads throughout their European decorative arts and ancient art galleries. So all these have taught me all sorts of good things and bad things about iPads, and I'm going to share some little bits and pieces of with you. Number 1, projecting with a VGA adapter. You can do this. It works pretty nicely. I recommend that you practice with it a little bit. Don't depend on going someplace and plugging your iPad into a projector and assuming that it will work. They're not always compatible with projectors, and not all apps are fully compatible with projectors. So one of the lessons I've learned is, although this works great, and I'm going to use it a lot to show you some things today, my first lesson is to double check before you go and plan to do a presentation that you've never plugged into a projector before. Make sure it's going to work. We actually learned this last year at the iPad conference when I made my first presentation. This is the connector. It's really simple. It's like a $20, $25 connector. So another trick, how many of you know how to make web pages into desktop icons? Okay. This is a really good trick if you use certain websites a lot. And this is, again, very basic, but if you are a person that hasn't used this before, so any website that you like, you can make into a desktop icon that you can then later access. And this is really handy for if you've got, for instance, you have your own museum's website you use all the time. Rather than going into Safari and having it bookmarked in there, you can just go in, and right here you can see if the website actually is enabled to make a web icon, it will actually change. Like you can see the NMC icon right here. It says Add to Home Screen. If I touch that, and I can change the title, I'm not going to for this example, and then say Add, you'll see I now have a website just like an app on my desktop. This is really handy. There's probably a number of websites you use all the time that don't have apps, and this is a good way to appify them. Almost everything I'm talking about is transferable to iPhones, not to Android. And I haven't used Android enough to be able to answer what is and what's not. Number 3. Oh, this is the steps on how to add to your home page. Add an icon to your home page. Again, there's a link there, so you'll be able to look this up later if you didn't get it from me now. Recording video activity on an iPad screen. Now, this is something that I learned for doing this is one of the things that's hard to do, is to record video so that you can make a demonstration for somebody, a video demonstration of actually working on an iPad screen. Because a lot of times you've got apps that only run on the iPad, and you want to make a tutorial or something like that out of it. So I'm not going to demonstrate how this works for you right now, but I'll just tell you. There's an app called the Reflection app. And what it does is that if you need to have a Mac running the Reflection app. And then if you get your iPad on the same Wi-Fi and you open up the app on your iPad, you will have a complete reflection of your iPad on your screen here on your computer. And Reflection actually has a recording option, and you hit record, and basically whatever you do here is recorded there. In this case, we're showing an iPhone, but if it was an iPad, you would have this whole area in the screen filled up with the iPad. It even allows you to set it. You can either make it so that the content area of the iPad is all your recording, or you can make it so it actually records. If you have a white iPad, it will put a white frame around it. It will record the whole iPad so you can show that to people. I've actually found this for educational purposes to be really useful to make little screen. Because there's no way, like there is on a computer, there's all these screen recorders for computers. There isn't such a thing for iPads. One of the things that I really like, how many people have used Sketch? Oh, yeah. Okay. This is a really awesome application. I use it all the time for a million different things, and I'll show you right now. So one of the things you can do is I can take a picture, and then I can say use. And then I can just choose these tools. Oh, did that the wrong way. I can say, this is Chris. And now, as soon as I'm done with that, I can say, oh, and I want to email that to somebody. So you can sit and take pictures and visually annotate and just shoot pictures off. What I use it for a lot is to pull up web pages or projects that I'm working on and write annotations to developers saying, this button needs to be moved over here. This needs to be changed. I mean, Liz and I did this a lot when we were working on the project we're going to talk about tomorrow. But it's a super useful tool to be able to, and they make it not only for the iPad, but they make it and for the iPhone, but they also make it for the computer. And once you save something here, it will show up if you have it on your computer. Anything that you've captured and annotated will be over here as well. So you basically have it everywhere without, so you don't even have to email it to yourself. Next thing, kind of iPad 101, but it's something that's also really useful if you're going to teach people how to use iPads. It's how do you capture an iPad screen image. So this is, I've got, well, anything. I've got this screen up here, and I want to show people how to arrange the apps, or the little icons on their screen. This is a way that all I have to do is I have to hold, as it shows there, I just have to push the power button and the home button simultaneously, and you'll see kind of a camera flash on here. Do you guys see that? And that means that it's now been recorded to my camera roll on my iPad. And so it's now basically like I took a picture with the camera, and whatever's on the screen, in fact, I used this a lot to make this presentation to take, well, I probably captured that right there that way. But it's a really useful tool if you're teaching with the iPad and you want to actually capture different states of things to be able to put it over there. Capturing and printing 3D objects. This is kind of to whet your interest in what is going to be taught later on. One of the things that's really cool that Liz introduced me to is this program 3D Catch, which allows you to basically use the camera in your iPad, and you guys are going to learn how to do this here, and walk around a three-dimensional object like this potted plant, and then make a three-dimensional model. And then if you either mail that model off someplace or have access through a 3D printer someplace, you can actually print a three-dimensional reproduction. And it's pretty darn simple, and you will have a lot of fun doing it. Selecting the right case for the right place. There's a million different kinds of cases out there, and I just wanted to introduce you to a few of them. So this case here is actually a tethered aluminum case that goes around the iPad so you can put it in a public place and nobody can steal it. These are in the Art Institute of Chicago. So they basically just are, it's like locking up a bike, but locking up an iPad in a public place. So people can handle it, but they can't take it away. The case on the right is more of just an industrial grade. If you're going to have it in your, in the hands of people where you think it might get dropped and you really want it to be durable, that's a great case. A lot of the, all the dancers in my performance use this, which is the new Trent case, which basically locks on the back of, and then it's a handle so that you can rotate the iPad 360. It's also really good for docents to use because it allows you to just walk with it down at your side. Or there's a number of different cases like this. In fact, last year, I know NMC had some different back handle cases like this. And in this case, Houston's actually using this case on their iPads, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, which is a case that's just basically a big foam safety ring for little kids, so that basically you can drop it and bounce it off the floor and it's not going to break. It's really, it's kind of the SpongeBob case. But this, you go from the SpongeBob to the lockdown bike, and you can see that none of this stuff existed a year ago, and it's changed a lot. AirPlay is a really cool thing. I can't demonstrate here because we don't have a HD TV. Oh, we don't have a TV. You need a HD TV or a video projector and an Apple TV, which is this little box here. The Apple TV does a whole bunch of stuff like Netflix and all that kind of stuff. But one of the coolest things that it does is it allows you to, with the push of a button, send your iPad screen to a television. And we talked a little bit about this last year because I think in the right museum situation, if you have your tour guides prepping a group to go out in the galleries, or you even have large screen TV displays in your galleries, and if you would just buy this $99 device, your tour guide could take over that screen that talks about what's going on in your museum temporarily to show something to a whole group off of the iPad, and then switch right back. But it's amazingly simple as to how, with a touch of a button, you can send what's on this screen, even if it's full. You can even do this with an iPhone. And even if it's that little tiny video on an iPhone, it will be beautiful video on a big screen. Chris and I sometimes sit around and Chris and I are married, in case you didn't know that. But Chris and I sit around and we'll watch YouTube videos, just shooting them up on the TV. Oh, watch this one, watch that one. But it's just, it's just nice to be able to share, photos and things like that. Another primer for something upcoming is you should definitely get the Horizon Report app, because everything that NMC is doing, and not only the programs they're offering like this, but also they have weekly news feeds, very much like a Twitter stream, but much more in-depth reviews of things that are having to do with breakthroughs in technology they think are relevant to the field of education as a whole, not just museum education. This is a great app that lets you access all sorts of layers of information in the New Media Consortium's archive. It's a really great way to just quickly dig in, see what's new. You don't get the same information on the website or anyplace else. It's a real nice compendium. How many of you have played with Google Goggles? Okay. I'm going to try to do a little demo of Google Goggles. This has all sorts of cool applications for museums. Now what I'm going to do, so I have this picture of the Bouguereau painting up here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to the iPad so you can see Google. And if you can see at the bottom of the Google screen, you can do all sorts. You can do searches based on voice. You can do searches based on goggles. So if I say goggles, then I have this. So I could basically search for anything that it sees familiar here. But I'm hoping when it sees this painting here. So basically you're taking a picture of something that you want Google to recognize. And it analyzes it, determines where the subject is. And then we go down below and we can see here is all the information that you can find on Google about that particular painting. And so you can walk around any museum and point your iPad at paintings and learn all sorts of stuff beyond what the museum's telling you on the little label, as well as link to YouTube videos and all sorts of other things. OK, this is one of my favorite. Have you guys seen this pottery making application? This one you have to buy, but this is totally worth buying. A lot of these things I'm showing you are free. So this is a pottery app. You can see as I move it around, it actually kind of gets a sense of me being in this space. And if I had audio on, it's not that important, but there's ambient audio of you being in an artist studio. And so it's a really cool thing. It's an art game. And you start out by getting a letter. You can basically just jump in and play and start working with the clay and pulling it out and drawing it up. And is it working? Yeah. So so you can do this, but you also get these letters from, let me see if I can get one up here. You get these letters and these images. Your aunt will send you letters that says, museum has just contacted me that they want a reproduction of this clay pot. And it gives you information about, it's a Navajo pot made in blah, 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 and we want a reproduction of it made for their educational area. And would you make it for me? I'll give you so much money. And so you make the pot, and you can see there's like little rating things. As you work on the pot, it tells you how much, if you're getting close to the design, it starts to give you more stars. And you actually go in and you can paint it. You can make a pot that looks exactly like that. But you have to do it in all these little gradual ways. And then you can go and either you can send it to your aunt and she'll send you the money. Or you can take it to auction. Let me see if I can take it to auction really quick. Oh, first I have to fire it. What's that? What's the name of this app? Let's Create Pottery. So it's firing it right now. And now I can go in and paint it and put handles on it and do all sorts of additional stuff to it. But I am actually going to take it to auction, which I love this because it's kind of like Antiques Roadshow. And if you hear the audio, so if you hear the audio, you can hear like in the background, you can hear all the. So I sold that. So now once you get this money, you can go to the art store and you can buy more materials to make your pottery. So I just love the fact that someone's taken art and made it into some kind of actually really fun game. So another thing, kind of along with the frames, are this idea of actually putting iPads out as interactive touchscreens. And again, this is at the Art Institute of Chicago. Liz and I will be talking about this tomorrow, where we actually have pedestals mounted in front of the works of art. There's all sorts of different kinds of pedestals. There's wall mounts. There's counter mounts. There's a wide range of these things. And you can take something very simple, like one of these apps, or a web page, and I'll show you how to lock down a web page later on, and just basically turn it into a permanent touchscreen program or a temporary touchscreen program. So how do you restrict access to an app? So if you're going to use it, part of the reason I'm showing this right now is because if you're going to use an iPad in one of those frames, how are you going to keep people from going places you don't want them to? Some of the frames cover the home button. Some of them don't. But I want to show you two different ways to lock an iPad down so that you can just restrict what people do. The first one is built into the latest operating system, iOS 6. If we go to our general settings, which for those people who haven't used an iPad before, this is kind of the main. There's very little interface to an iPad other than the apps. There's all those little apps, and you touch them, and then you launch whatever it is. You launch Let's Create Art. You launch the Google thing. This is also an app, but it controls all the functionality of the iPad. It's kind of your control panel, and so you don't have to access this very often, but if you're going to get in the guts of your iPad to actually set some personalization kind of settings, this is where it happens. Now, and connect to Wi-Fi and stuff like that. One of the things that's in here is accessibility. And I'm not going to talk a lot about accessibility, but you can see one of the wonderful things that people love about the iPad is it has a lot of cool accessibility stuff built right in, and that it can do text-to-speech, and it can do zooming, and it can invert the colors. It can do, what you select. It can speak those words out loud. There's a lot of really cool stuff to help disabled folks work with the iPad. Now, one of the things that's kind of buried in this area, but is not, it's in here, but it's not really something I can see that would be used a lot with the disabled community, but it's a function that's really useful to us, is this one called guided access. Now, what guided access does is it basically locks you down so that you can just guide people into specific areas of the iPad. And so it requires you to set a passcode, and I'm just going to set mine to 11111, just so I don't forget, because I generally don't lock my stuff down. So now it's on. Everybody following me? Got guided access. It's turned on. I've set a passcode. Now I can go to something. I'll just go to, we'll go back to the Horizon report, or the Horizon Navigator. And so now I'm on this screen, and I'm like, this is going to be a great kiosk for this conference, but I really don't want people going into Navigator. So what I can do is, I'm already in limited access mode, but if I press this, if I press the home button 3 times, whoops. If I click my heels 3 times, if I press the home button 3 times rapidly, it brings up at the bottom of the screen, it's probably hard for you guys to see it, but it brings up this guided access toolbar. And one of the things that's great about this is you can actually draw areas on here. So when somebody's using the iPad, they can use, and I can do this, and I can say, oh, well, I also don't want them to use this over here as well. And so I've blocked off those areas so that people can't access those, but they'll be able to use the rest of the app without anything else. Okay, so now this should be working. It says guided. You can see guided access is enabled. So now I can touch everything here, but I can't touch these areas. And the home button also doesn't do anything. So if you're locked up in a kiosk, you can't touch this home button and go back any place. You're basically just locked into this. If you touch the home button 3 times really quickly, it brings up that unlocking code, so you can now unlock it and turn that functionality back off. Does that make sense to everybody? You can use this for a whole, this is one of those things you just have to leave in the back of your head of, oh, we can lock people into a particular application, and we can even restrict some buttons in that application. I can't tell you specifically how to use it for your application. Part 2 is using just this basic script. And this is what we've done at the Art Institute of Chicago. The advantage, what this script does is it just locks you into one app. You can't get out of this one app no matter what. It disables this button. The good thing is that even if one of the reasons we didn't use guided access at the Art Institute of Chicago was we didn't want people hitting this button 3 times and bringing up that little panel. We just wanted it to always be a clean experience. What this does is if you go to this URL, it will bring up a dialog box on your, and I'm not recommending you do it right now. You should read this before you do it. But it will bring up a dialog box that says, do you want me to install the profile that will kill the home button? And if you say OK, it will make it so the next time you start an app, it will be stuck on that app until you restart your iPad by turning it off and turning it back on, which most people are in frames and everything are going to have the turn on and off button covered. You have to turn it on and off and then go into that control panel that I was showing you and remove that profile. But it's a really good, solid way of locking the home button so that no one can ever get into the iPad. Art break 2. I thought I would just show you, just like the pottery, I was just going to show you things that I thought were, a couple of things that I thought were great. I like this just because I think it's a beautiful piece of art, and it's called the Fifth Wall. So you can take any one of these and make it fill the screen. I like this enough that I'd put it in a frame in my office and just watch it, because it goes on infinitely. It goes into all these different variations, and it's all, it takes a long time to make sense of exactly how they're manipulating everything. But there's a lot of really neat pieces of art that artists are making that are like this.
Scott, show again how you change what they
There's all sorts of configurations. If you play with it long enough, you can get all sorts of interesting things going on. But anyways, it's your art break. So the next thing I want to show you is how to record text annotated audio notes. And this is something that I find really useful when I'm working in the galleries, especially if I'm working with a subject matter expert and I'm walking through, for instance, with the curator, and the curators, a lot of times when I was at the Art Institute of Chicago, we were walking through and the curator's telling me stuff and about the objects that we're going to interpret, and I want to try to catch everything, but I also want to take some notes at the same time. And Evernote, which many of you probably have played with before, does this really well, because what it does is it allows you to always, Evernote is a tool, and Chris and I use it extensively, because what it does is it allows you to take notes on one device and have them available on, if you take notes on your iPhone, it's on your iPad, it's on your computer. You don't even have to push a button to transfer it. They just are always in sync with each other. And so you basically have if I take notes during a client meeting at home on my computer, and then I'm out in the field and I want to look up what I wrote in my notes, I always have it on my phone because it's always in sync. But one of the things it allows you to do as well is it allows you to be taking text notes and be recording audio simultaneously, so you can go back in your notes and see exactly what was being said. Go back and review the audio of what was being said when you wrote these specific notes. It's just one of the, this app, again, this is made by the same people that make Skitch. It's also free, and it does amazing stuff. If you haven't used it before, I highly recommend you experiment with a little. This little device, which they call the Apple Camera Connector Kit, plugs into the same place that the, well, as you can see, plugs into the bottom of the iPad. And it's a really great tool. I was kind of skeptical as to how useful it would be to me until I had one, and then all of a sudden I realized how many different things you can do with it. It's not just about connecting cameras. You can plug a keyboard, a USB keyboard into this and type on a USB keyboard instead of having to buy expensive wireless keyboard. You can plug any cards from your cameras into this and read and load all the pictures directly, which is a lot faster than loading them onto your computer and then passing them. And you can also plug a USB drive with, one of the things I was doing for that dance performance was passing these huge video files back and forth. And it's super fast to have even like a 30-minute long video on a USB drive and just plug it into here and go and just hit load, and it will, in a matter of, I don't know, 5 seconds, move the whole video file onto the iPad so you can play it. There's no way to move media quite as fast. So this is really worth the investment, and there's a lot of, this is actually a third-party one. This isn't the official Apple one. The third-party ones, I think, are as good, if not better, because the third-party ones have more connections than the Apple ones do. Manage those files. One of the things that's weird about an iPad, and it takes some getting used to, is you never actually see your files on the iPad. Unlike a computer where you've got all these Word docs that you're managing, all you see is the apps. If you haven't used an iPad before, it's a little confusing at first because you're like, well, where's this file? But you don't see access to it. You only see access to them through the apps. Now, there are cases when, especially if you're doing like docent training and stuff like that, where you're going to want to be managing a whole lot of images, and you're going to want to be putting them in folders, and you're going to be wanting to do things that the iPad doesn't natively let you do. This application called the File app is really good for letting you organize your files and letting you look at them in a bunch of different ways. It gives you that view that you otherwise don't have of the files on your iPad. And so you can create folders and move all your pictures into different folders. And then you have this great set of tools. Again, these kind of tools are not available in many apps, where you can actually zip files and then email them or copy them, rename them, these are not things that you typically find in iPad applications, and this is it's a nice toolbox. This is a bit of a gimmick, but it's also a really cool thing, and I'm going to try to demonstrate it to you. This is a program called WordLens, and what WordLens does, if you're traveling someplace or you're in a museum in a foreign country, you can take your iPad around, and it will automatically translate for you, and I'll try to show you. Okay, so here's my label, and I have it set to English to Spanish, so I'm going to set it from Spanish to English. And you can see that on the spot, it translates this, and we can actually, if we get it to a point where we think we can read it well, we can just freeze it. I didn't get all of it. But basically, you can walk around and point this at road signs, and it will see things on the horizon, and actually, any word that it can read, it will translate it live for you. So, and I think the thing that's the most interesting about this is just the potential. This, again, shows what kind of like Google goggles could do in the future, where you're walking around, it's actually just reading words and going. This is another teaser for what we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But if you haven't downloaded an iBook already, you should. Find useful media. One of the things that I have to do, and you guys, if you're doing multimedia, all have to do, is probably find other images that you can use and media that you can use. And there's a great tool. I think it's so much easier to use than anything else on the desktop or phone or anything like that. And it's called Flickr Stacker. I use Flickr a lot because it has the Creative Commons license in it, which means anything that has, so if something has a Creative Commons license that says that you can openly use it for non-commercial use, museums can typically use it. So this application called Flickr Stacker is a really nice way to do a search. This is what Flickr Stacker looks like. If we did a search, I did a search for Blanton, for instance, and there was literally thousands of images of the museum and works of art. So we could go in here when we do a search, we could say I want to just search things that are Creative Commons images that I can reuse. And then we can go in here, and it's got a really nice interface for quickly flipping through thousands of images. And the minute you see one you want to use, you can email it, you can save it to Dropbox, and so on. But I have not found an easier way to look for Creative Commons images than use it from Flickr, which is my main source for Creative Commons images, than this tool. Put them on wheels. If you're going to use a lot of iPads, these carts are the way to go. They're secure. They're great because A, they charge. You can sync. You can charge a whole lot of iPads in one place. You can lock them up securely, and you can push them all around the place. And so they're, if you can, they start at about $1,500, so they're not cheap. But if you look at even just a charging rack for iPads, you're talking about close to that amount of money. These are really nice. Manage a fleet of iPads. I'm not going to go into this in depth, but I'm just going to tell you, if you're thinking about, even if you just have a docent core that's using a half dozen iPads, it's easier to plug all the iPads into one computer and use the Apple Configurator, which is a free application you can download from Apple, to manage all the iPads. You can basically synchronize a group of iPads so that they all have the same apps, they all have the same iOS, they all have the same settings, they all have the same user accounts. You can manage a whole group of iPads this way. There are also numerous tools out there. Liz is a really good person from the Art Institute to talk about this with, because they've started to use some different tools recently because they have such a large fleet of iPads installed in the galleries. But there are these tools out there that you should look into. Apple Configurator is a free app. It works on your computer. Number 24, quit your unused apps. This is something that we all fall prey to. One of the things that's really strange about the iPad is once you start an app, it doesn't ever quit. When you go to another app, it stays running in the background, what Apple refers to as multitasking. And so there's some real advantages to that, because you can quickly, once you get the rhythm down, flip between different apps by just going down to the bottom of the screen, clicking the home button and touching the app that you want to jump to, and you can jump back and forth between apps. But eventually you get a dozen or more apps that are all running in the background, and what it does is it takes up memory from your computer, or from your iPad. It slows it down, and it burns through your battery much faster if you're running all these apps in the background. So it's a good habit to get in. It's good to get in the habit of going in and quitting your apps. OK, so if I double-click this, these are the apps that are currently running. Now, if I touch these apps and hold, if I touch and hold these little minus signs pop up, and then I can go through here and close out these individual apps and free up memory and free up battery life. And last but not least, number 25, let's revisit what we've learned a little bit about the docents. And all I want to do is point out that we wrote an addendum to the research piece that we did about training docents that we presented last time. We wrote an addendum to it. So there's a whole nother chapter to this. And if you go to that bit.ly address, again, these slides will be someplace where you can get to it. You'll be able to get to that additional chapter for free. Actually, the whole chapter, the first part of the chapter is now online for free. And the new second part of the chapter is online for free. So that's my 25. Thank you very much.